While everyone is so focused on this mystery item that has apparently fallen out of Nancy Pelosi's pocket, everyone seems to also be completely distracted from the lockdowns that are being imposed in certain parts of the United States. But since you guys want to talk about this mystery package falling out of Nancy Pelosi's pocket, let's have a quick look at this first. Now, before we go into this, I want you guys to comment down below what you think that this was that fell out of Nancy Pelosi's pocket. Was it an index card, maybe some notes or something like that? Was it perhaps a handkerchief? Was it a business card? Could it have been a white powdery substance inside of a plastic baggie? I want you guys to let me know what you think it is in the comments down below. Well, guys, what do you think that was? And something that we cannot ignore. I want you to notice Nancy Pelosi noticing this particular white object on the floor. So she knew it was there, but she decided not to pick it up. Why do you think Nancy Pelosi didn't pick that up? Now, of course, we have to talk about something that's going on right now. There's something big that's going on, and the Democratic Party, they're getting desperate. And we've seen some rather aggressive attempts already from the Democratic Party. They tried Plan A, which was to, let's just say Plan A failed when Donald Trump miraculously, through God's grace, turned his head and managed to survive the Plan A. Plan B was, let's go ahead and take out Joe Biden, since essentially he was getting destroyed in the polls. And let's bring in Kamala Harris. We'll leverage her being black to try to win over the majority of Americans, black Americans who want to see the first black woman be president of the United States. And the list goes on and on and on. Now, of course, Kamala will flip-flop whatever ethnicity she needs to be at any given point in time. Right now, she's being black. Perhaps in the future, she'll be Indian or Asian, or maybe even swap her gender for all we know in the future. However, Kamala Harris's honeymoon period seems to be ending. And the real question is what will Democrats resort to next? Well, Democrats really wanted to get Donald Trump out of the White House back in 2020, if you remember. All of a sudden, there was a pandemic that had hit, and it ended up shutting the entire country down. This allowed the Democrats to blame Donald Trump for the worst economic disaster in American history. Well, what are we seeing now? We are now seeing deadlier strains, and this coming in from CNN, guys, deadlier strains of Mpox spreads to more countries, raising officials' alarms. And again, we are also hearing reports that cities are actually beginning the lockdown already. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But again, we need to be paying attention to what's happening here. It says here that cases of a deadlier strain of Mpox have been confirmed in 4 countries in Africa, raising alarms among health officials around the world. We've already received multiple warnings from the World Health Organization, the WHO. Levels of Mpox, formerly known as Mpox in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, have reached more than 14,000 reported cases and 511 deaths. And it has spread to 4 neighboring countries that have not previously reported cases, according to the World Health Organization: Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. The WHO officials said Wednesday that they plan to convene an emergency committee soon to determine whether the outbreak is a public health emergency of international concern. Guys, keep in mind, Democrats are very crafty individuals, okay? When the elections don't go their way, things can happen. I'm just saying, and we all need to be prepared. The United States Centers of Disease Control and Prevention also issued a health advisory Wednesday to address the risk of additional spread, guys, recommending that physicians maintain a heightened index of suspicion for Mpox in people who recently traveled to the DRC or bordering countries. Now, we're also getting reports of this incurable disease. Okay, folks, take a look at this. So Massachusetts here, a Massachusetts town imposes voluntary lockdown. I hate those little pop-ups. Anyway, Massachusetts town imposes a voluntary lockdown after dark as fears of incurable mosquito-borne infections grow. Guys, this is, don't sleep on these warnings here, okay? Residents in a Massachusetts town are being urged not to leave their homes after dark due to a deadly mosquito-borne virus. Okay. All right, guys, the warnings are on the wall. The Board of Health in Oxford, a city of 13,000 people, about 50 miles southwest of Boston. So this is pretty close to Boston, Massachusetts here, guys. That's a major city. And all we need is Boston residents to be infected by this. There's an international airport nearby. This could be huge. And again, they're saying that this is an incurable mosquito-borne infection, okay? Summer's ending. Mosquitoes are getting a little desperate before they go into their dormancy state. That's all I'm saying. So keep a watchful eye, because the Democrats want to win this presidential election by any means necessary. In 2020, Governor Walz unilaterally closed places of worship, schools, and businesses for several months, infringing on the rights and the freedoms of Minnesotans under the guise of emergency powers. His heavy-handed approach during COVID-19 demonstrated a troubling disregard for constitutional freedoms and the rule of law, end quote. The Federal District Court of Minnesota had to intervene and overrule Walz's shutdown of the churches in the Northland Baptist case, and the resulting settlement required him to refrain from any further discrimination against churches in COVID-related orders. But the representative said despite the ruling in this case, Governor Walz continues the same pattern of overreach, disregard for constitutional protections, and a lack of respect toward his fellow Minnesotans. Now that's crazy. Just think about what a man like that could do if he were in the vice presidential seat. Think about what kind of power he would have. How about nationwide lockdowns? Kamala Harris chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her VP running mate. But you know what, guys? The people in Mar-a-Lago cheered when they heard the news. That is coming from former Trump White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany. Check it out.
Kayleigh McEnany now joins us in studio. And good morning to you. Already Republicans are saying this is the most extreme ticket in political history. What's your take on Tim Walz on the undercard now? This is a stunning choice. I imagine there's a lot of cheering at Mar-a-Lago at the moment. Look, Tim Walz, he's no one to scoff at. He unseated a 6-term Republican in Congress. He won a conservative district. He began as a moderate. And then he had a radical transformation as soon as he got a trifecta in Minnesota. I think it is fair to call him a progressive in sheep's clothing. When you look at his record over the last few years, what you see are transgender surgeries for minors, carbon electrical grid by 2040, driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. In function, his abortion policy allows abortion until birth. These are policies that are far to the left of America. And as John McCormick at the Wall Street Journal pointed out, Kamala Harris has to do the exact opposite of what Tim Walz did. Tim Walz became more progressive. Kamala Harris is trying to become more moderate. But Republicans are going to say, you've shed all your progressive policies, but yet you chose a progressive instead of the guy who outperformed Donald Trump and Joe Biden in Pennsylvania, and that man's name is Josh Shapiro.
Now, I'm telling you guys, there are just too many issues hounding Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Now, I asked a friend of mine from Minnesota, the way they describe Walz is that he's a horrible governor, a rotten person, and a liar. Now, for one, he is definitely going to have to defend what many experts call the draconian decisions and the glaring errors that he made as a state leader in the COVID pandemic. What do I mean by draconian decisions? Well, just as an example, the Minnesota governor in 2020 set up a hotline through which law enforcement enforcement received more than 10,000 emails from residents snitching on their neighbors, ignoring lockdown measures during the first year of the pandemic. I mean, it definitely does sound like something that Big Brother would do, right? House Majority Member Tim Emmer pretty much summed up when he said the rest of Walz's tenure as governor, his pandemic response was a complete and utter failure. I mean, even people across the pond in the UK are reacting to Kamala Harris's choice of Tim Walz as her VP. Here's what Sky News host Rita Panini says.
Now, I've got to ask you before you go about Kamala Harris and her choice of running mate. She's picked the far-left governor of Minnesota. This is a man who made headlines for signing legislation to put tampons in boys' restrooms in schools. He backed the BLM riots even as they destroyed Minneapolis, and who said he'd provide giant ladders, Douglas, so illegal immigrants could climb any wall Donald Trump built. This choice is astonishing. What do you make of Tim Walz as a future Veep?
Well, you know, it's interesting when this happens is that the whole world's media attention turns onto Tim Walz. And you've already listed some of the really, I mean, I think just indefensible things that he's done in his career. Of course, he will now pretend to be somebody else, just as Kamala tries to pretend to be somebody else. But, you know, remember the intense scrutiny of J.D. Vance once Trump nominated him as his Veep choice. It was very, very interesting because, of course, everybody goes over every single little thing that Vance has ever said, and they find something that offends some people, and then they blow it up. We should expect the same thing to be happening with Tim Walz in the coming days, and we'll see if it does. But it ought to. And, you know, all of this stuff that you've just listed, the bananas stuff about tampons and boys' bathrooms and the BLM riot stuff and else, you know, if he tries to run as a law and order candidate, I would expect him to get a certain amount of pushback. But some of the media being what it is, maybe we won't. Maybe he'll be able to reinvent himself just as Kamala has been able to reinvent herself as a sparklingly innovative, brilliant, successful, dynamic, and inspiring political leader who will lead the free world in the 21st century.
Oh, look, I'm sure the media protection racket will be in full swing, but just the fact that she did not pick the most obvious candidate, which may have secured her Pennsylvania, and it seems to be, Douglas, purely because of fears that picking a Jewish man who has been pro-Israel was going to cause all sorts of divisions within the Democrats, perhaps even see unrest at the Democrat National Convention. I mean, the Democrats appear to have an anti-Semitism problem that runs a lot deeper than just the squad.
Wow, even people abroad are saying that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are pretending to be someone else. And did you hear that part about anti-Semitism? Definitely some pretty strong words against the presumptive Democratic nominees, guys. Now, apart from the pandemic response, they're also criticizing Walz's record on immigration and border security, including his support of driver's licenses for illegal immigrants and calls to make Minnesota a sanctuary state. Yeah, guys, you heard me right. Driver's licenses and calls to make Minnesota a sanctuary state. They're trying to convert the entire country, guys. Look at the pattern. This is why former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley called the Harris-Walz ticket as a win for open borders, a win for socialism, and for Iran. Governor Tim Walz also gave illegal immigrants health care, tuition, driver's licenses, all funded by American taxpayer money, guys. The way they describe Walz's leadership in Minnesota, absolutely repulsive. Walz has applauded efforts to pull state troops from the southern borders. Don't forget that, guys. There was also Minnesota's push for free school meals. Governor Tim Walz last spring, he signed a bill providing free breakfasts and lunches at schools across the state to any kid regardless of family income. Sounded good in theory, but now state leaders are saying that these free meals from Walz will cost a lot more money than initially budgeted for. $81 million more over the next 2 years and $95 million in the next 2 years after that. Yeah, that's a whole lot more if you ask me. Somebody forgot to carry the one. Now, with the Walz-Harris team being confirmed, former President Donald Trump predicted that even President Biden isn't going to be happy about it. In fact, in his latest Truth Social post, the former president predicted that Joe Biden would crash the DNC later this month and take back the Democratic nomination. Donald Trump's Truth Social post, what are the chances that crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States, whose presidency was unconstitutionally stolen from him by Kamala Barack Hussein Obama, crazy Nancy Pelosi, shifty Adam Schiff, crying Chuck Schumer, and others on the lunatic left, crashes the Democratic National Convention and tries to take back the nomination, beginning with challenging me to another debate. Now, what do you guys think about this? Are they going to pull out from this train wreck and try to get Biden back into the fray? All the details in this video, guys, so definitely don't miss out. We're going to go ahead and dive right in. All right, so first, let's talk about what people call the massive overreach of Tim Walz's administration in Minnesota during COVID. Now, I told you guys about the hotline where they had Minnesotans basically snitching on their family and their neighbors for not following Walz's lockdown measures during the first year of the pandemic, right? Well, he said he wanted to counter Republicans who want to roll back Americans' rights and stand up for the people's fundamental freedoms. And this is exactly what lawmakers and civil liberty groups accused him of not doing during the COVID years. A spokesperson of the Upper Midwest Law Center said in their statement, quote, "Now, there's also hundreds of millions of dollars wasted on various COVID relief efforts, some of which fraudsters abused. The U.S. Department of Labor found that Minnesota overpaid roughly $434 million in unemployment insurance to state applicants from July 2020 to July 2023. And did you hear about the $250 million scheme that happened under Walz's watch? Yeah, a Minnesota nonprofit pocketed federal funds paid to the Minnesota Department of Education, and this was supposed to be for the feeding of needy children. Operators of the nonprofit, Feeding Our Future, instead used the taxpayer money for their luxury lifestyle, including buying lavish cars and real estate holdings as far away as Turkey and Kenya. I mean, that's $250 million in food taken out of kids' mouths, you guys. Now, I don't use this word a lot, but dang, that's just awful. And Walz, they said that he tried to not take responsibility for the massive fraud that happened under his watch. But the district judge on the case said that it was his state education department that voluntarily funded the fraudsters without taking heed of serious deficiencies in its oversight. I mean, with all this, it's no wonder that they're saying that we need President Trump and his staff back in office. Don't people see what's happening right here? I mean, I'm scared for all of us. I mean, this could definitely be the most important election of our lives. So if you're appreciating the information and the analysis in the video so far, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way we can keep serving you guys the latest updates on what exactly is coming down the pipeline with this presidential election. In fact, we're about halfway through, so let's go ahead and jump back in. Now, apart from his record on COVID policy, there's also his very questionable stance on immigration. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley described the Harris-Walz ticket as a win for open borders, for socialism, and for Iran. RNC Chairman Michael Whatley officially said in a statement that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, their two open borders, weak on crime, defund the police liberals who make up the most radical far-left ticket in the history of our country. Walz dissed former President Donald Trump's efforts to build additional walls at the southern border, basically saying that he'd invest in a ladder factory. House Speaker Mike Johnson called him a progressive running mate who has voiced support for socialism, supports sanctuary cities, and wants to give driver's licenses to the millions of illegal aliens that Kamala Harris has allowed into our country. Texas Governor Greg Abbott called the pairing the most dangerous PVP ticket ever. She supports free healthcare for illegal immigrants, and he signed laws giving state services to them. Both provide magnets for more illegal immigration. Walz has even gone on record saying that he supports turning his home state into a sanctuary state while also backing other stances that cater to undocumented migrants. Not to mention, as governor, Walz also has signed several pieces of legislation to provide state-funded healthcare, driver's licenses, and free college tuition to illegal immigrants. State-funded means that all these illegal immigrant freebies, they're coming from Minnesota taxpayer money and from American taxpayer money, you guys. And hey, let's not forget his huge support for pulling state troops from the southern border. His free school meals program went over big with families, but maybe it went a little bit overboard because Walz provided free breakfasts and lunches at schools across the state to any kid, regardless of family income, meaning that they were giving free meals to families who could more than afford it. Many schools this fall saw demand for meals jump. In Northfield Public Schools, student breakfast counts rose by nearly 2/3 from the prior year, with lunches up 20%. Roseville area schools saw similar numbers, 30% more kids eating lunch in the cafeteria and 50% more eating breakfast. And surprise, surprise, they found out that these free meals will cost Minnesotan taxpayers a lot more than initially budgeted. $81 million more over the next 2 years and $95 million in the 2 years after that. State Representative Kristen Robbins said that the state's move gave free lunch to all the wealthy families. For her, and I bet a lot of Minnesotans, that's a place that I think we need to look at, right? Is that really a priority? I mean, with a ticket like Harris-Walz, it's no wonder why former President Trump is predicting a Biden comeback. Now, according to his Truth Social post after the Harris-Walz ticket was announced, Biden feels like he made a historically tragic mistake by handing over the US presidency, a coup, to the people in the world that he hates the most, and he wants it back now. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this up and dive into some discussion, guys. What do you think about Governor Tim Walz as Kamala Harris's running mate? I mean, we've gone through a lot of different angles today, from his controversial decisions during the COVID-19 pandemic to his stances on immigration and even his free school meals initiative. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this pairing. Let me know in the comments down below. Do you think Tim Walz is the right choice for VP Kamala Harris, or is this just a complete misstep for the Harris campaign? I'll be honest with you guys, if Trump wins, we don't even have to worry about it. And while you're mulling that over, I got another video for you guys that you absolutely need to check it out. It's a fiery video where we discuss a CNN host's astonishing comments telling black voters that they're basically stupid for saying that Kamala Harris isn't black. It sparked a lot of debates, and it's definitely a video you guys do not want to miss. So check that out after this one. Thanks so much for liking the video and subscribing. I'll see you on the next one.